welcome to the Seriously, It's Not Therapy podcast, where each week we take turns to ask each other a deep, purposeful question, which is completely unscripted. How are you, Brenda? Are you ready?
I'm good, thank you. I'm always ready.
Fantastic. Well, I've got a really interesting one this week because everybody says all the time, we have to trust our gut. But sometimes my gut just wants pizza. So how do you know? So let's be real with this. How do you know it's intuition versus impulse? And the reason I say that is I was watching this, ridiculous thing on social media where I was quite amused by the fact that, and it's this whole thing of like toxic spirituality, right? Where people feel they have to act on every impulse that comes up, like it's spiritually guided, it's divinely guided. I was feel drawn to do this. I feel drawn to do that, like it's part of their purpose. Which, as I was watching it thinking, no, this is impulse versus intuition because intuition feels deeply guided. Intuition is
Mm.
often not convenient. It's often quite uncomfortable, but it's this quiet voice in the back of our head that's pushing us towards a certain direction or, taking something up, taking some sort of action, but it's this persistent voice. It's not urgent. Whereas with impulse, it's like we've watched this fabulous, TED talk and we've got FOMO and we've got to take action now. It's sort of the FOMO based sales pitch and it's urgent. We have to follow the direction. We have to do this because again, it's impulsive, but it's not always the right thing for us to be doing. And so this sense of impulse versus intuition, sometimes those two voices can be fighting over which course of action we're going to take because they're both voices in our head and they can both be very strong voices in our head. The difference,
Mm.
I guess, being is that impulse can often feel like we're chasing a dopamine hit and it
Yeah.
can be a reaction to something. So this has happened. Oh, and it's this impulsive response. This is what I need to do. And we jump into it in order to get that dopamine fix. So that's where I wanted to start with you. Let's look at,
Mm.
impulse, because I'm sure if you're anything like me, you've made some interesting impulsive decisions and choices and taken some impulsive actions. Let's look at, what they are, because it's really fun to compare. So I'll start, which will give you some thinking time. I guess
Okay.
my first introduction to impulses, I left home at 16. And that was in reaction to my mother telling me that I couldn't go to this Russian cocktail party that I wanted to go to. She'd heard me on the phone, planning it on the weekend, so excited to go to this Russian cocktail party. And mum comes out and says, I don't know where you think you're going, but you are not going anywhere. And the voice in my head says,
Wow.
yeah, I am. You think so? Yeah, I am. I am. So weekend comes, pack a suitcase, go off to the party. But I hadn't clearly thought that through. There was no intuition at all based on that decision because I ended up leaving home after that. And I was 16.
Wow.
I still went to
That's
school and I went off to uni, but I hadn't thought that through at all. That was really, really impulsive and a great example of seeking that dopamine fix.
mm.
And with impulse, it's often a reaction to something. And we don't like what's happened. So we react in that
Mm.
moment. And we sometimes think that how we react is divinely guided. This is putting me on the path. But it's not necessarily doing that. Like with impulsive decisions, we can lose credibility. The outcomes are very different to intuition. What can you
Mm.
share where you've led from
Mm.
impulse rather than that deep gut feeling of intuition?
Ooh, yeah. Well, I didn't leave home at 16. Gosh, that's young, isn't it? Hey, we think of
Mm.
our own daughters. That's really young.
Mm.
Bought shoes in Italy that I didn't need. No, that's not very deep. Um, I think one that possibly was as impactful as your example was uh, a date that I went on with a guy. Now, it's no secret, I'm no fan of dating. It's like, oh, can't think of anything worse. Small talk, blah, blah, blah. So I'd set up this online profile. A friend at work helped me. And we were in hysterics when he was helping me write it.
Mm.
So anyway, I did that. Ended up going on this date. And I remember walking up to the date and sitting down. It's like, oh, that's not my usual type of guy. And I mean by a long shot.
Mm.
Just energy, appearance, everything. So, but then it's like, oh, well, maybe I need to do something differently. Anyway, when I walked away from that date later in the evening, it was exactly what you're talking about, that dopamine hit. Like everything
Mm.
was through rose-colored glasses. It was full on and texting. Gosh, I think he stayed within a week. It was, and that was my last relationship. And it was
Yeah.
incredibly impulsive. And oh my gosh, I could probably go on and talk at ages about how it probably set up a series of poorly made decisions, actually not guided. It
Mm.
was more that excitement feeling that, you know,
Yeah.
mm,
Yeah. Which is really interesting when you look back and think, wow, that was really impulsive. There was no guidance with that. Yeah,
no,
interesting.
not at all. Didn't
Interesting.
get still for a moment to think about
Mm.
whether it was right. Just like, oh my gosh, this is so exciting. Let's do this. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, because that dopamine fix is just fueling everything, isn't it? Mm.
Yeah. Yeah. And it
Yeah.
was funny because I was probably quite aware of it at the time, but didn't care. I wanted it. I wanted the dopamine hit. Mm,
Yeah. Yeah. But
mm,
that's a really great insight as well, because how often do we often know we're doing the wrong thing, but because we're getting a dopamine fix, we're ignoring that guidance and that intuition that's coming through.
mm,
And we've all done that because intuition often feels uncomfortable. It's inconvenient. Sometimes, like your example, it's not fun. That intuitive guidance,
mm.
knowing that this is not the right guy for me, you don't want to hear it because you're getting a massive
No,
dopamine, right?
very true. Very true.
Yeah. Yeah, and look, I have to say, I've done the same thing in relationships where certain
Mm,
needs get met, which overrides that sense of intuition of this isn't right. I shouldn't
Look,
be,
we won't
I
dig
shouldn't
into
be.
certain needs. Well, we won't dig into certain needs, will we, Tanya?
No.
Nudge, nudge. Wink, wink.
Says the Scorpio to the Capricorn. Yes. And
Oh
I'm
my
really,
goodness.
but I'm really conscious of that now, that when those needs get met, my brain does not function optimally at all. And I
Yeah.
filter out that intuitive guidance because
Mm,
I'm getting those needs met. And I think I'm more conscious of it now. And I know I have to be more conscious of it now because, yeah,
mm.
it just drowns out that intuitive guidance. So, like I was saying,
Yeah.
intuition often feels uncomfortable and we're not
Mm.
comfortable stepping into what we know that outcome might be, even though we know it's the right decision sometimes. So, have you got an example you can share where you did follow your intuition and you were clear at the time that it's not comfortable? It may not have, been an easy thing for you to follow that guidance, but you did follow that guidance. And then you were really pleased that you did because the outcome showed you that you were right to listen to that.
That actually feels quite easy for me because I've got quite a recent example and I've talked about it a bit with a few friends here in
Mm.
Auckland, which is why it's top of mind. But
Mm.
it was probably 3 months ago now. I had gone from having my own business into a job, and like the people were lovely and the work was
Mm.
okay, but there was just a few focus areas of the type of offering that didn't excite me. And
Mm.
different things were happening, and I just got this really strong feeling that I probably should move on. And the uncomfortableness of it was around, this is my first time working for someone else in a very long time. It's only been 6 months, not a good look. But
Mm,
anyway, I jumped online to online platform job postings, and I saw a job that was very similar to what I was doing, but more aligned with the offerings, which was
mm,
all about leadership development. And it was like, oh my gosh, that is a dream. So anyway, I went
mm,
through the process. I left them a message. I said, I actually need to talk to you because this is very sensitive, etc.,
mm,
etc. Now, where the intuitive piece comes in is that late that evening, we all received a message on our internal channel from our CE saying, where I was working now, saying he had an announcement to make the next morning. And so no one got any sleep that night, of course. So that was
mm.
interesting. And what happened was my manager of the time and one of the directors were leaving 2 days later.
Oh.
And I sat there and they were talking about getting back to their core business, which was not leadership. They kind of kept putting in they'll do leadership, but it wasn't that entire focus.
Mm,
And I just sat there and I thought, wow. And so I went for a walk with the boss that was leaving.
mm, mm.
And I said to her, you're not going to believe this, but I applied for a job yesterday. And
Yeah.
she said, oh, let me talk to you about da 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 da. So she ended up being a verbal referee. And then I did feel uncomfortable. I'm like, am I just jumping from one to the other? But everything with this new opportunity just it just went so smoothly from step to step. There was this ding ding, yes, there's another
Mm,
sign, it's correct, the
mm.
whole way through. And I'm a couple of months into that role now, and I'm just firing on all cylinders again. Really, really loving what I'm
Yeah.
doing every single day. Yeah.
Mm. And that's a really great example because it wasn't impulsive. You
Mm,
had the intuitive feelings coming through that you needed to act, you needed to move, but you didn't feel comfortable. You did question it. You questioned
mm,
yourself because, and again, and this is where you know it's intuition because it's this really strong knowing that you have to take a course of action, but it's not always
mm.
easy. It's really not
No.
always easy at all. But you follow that guidance and you're absolutely right.
I
Absolutely
think
right.
I was lucky that I had that first early sign. Oh my goodness, this is the
Mm,
job I was looking for then, you know.
mm,
So, but certainly not comfortable. And you feel it, right? You feel it. I feel it in my body. I feel it everywhere.
mm,
There's
mm.
just there's words, there's feelings, yeah, very, very obvious.
Yeah. And it is, it's just these constant repetitive messages that and feelings that come through. And it often happens when I give readings. I'll share something
Yeah.
with a client and say, look, have you thought about doing X, Y, and Z? Because your chart is screaming at me that you'd be really great at this. And quite often their response is, oh yeah, I keep getting like, yeah, that I should do this, I
Mm,
should do that, I should do this, I should do that. So their intuition's been screaming at them. They haven't listened, but then when they hear me suggest it, it's like, well, that's confirmation. And
mm,
that's another aspect, right, with intuition and impulse, because quite often when we don't trust our intuition, we're wanting that certainty that if I, and which is what we talked about last time, right? Am I
mm,
looking for proof? Am I looking for signs? And this
mm.
with intuition, quite often we will give me a sign if this is right. Give me some, fail safe proof that if I follow this guidance, this is right. And
But
but with, yeah.
no, carry on. Well, I was going to say that's really interesting because if I think back to the date, uh, in this conversation, my head's going, okay, so here's the big difference if I think about the two examples I gave is
Mm,
I wasn't as conscious with the date example, whereas with the intuition example, I
mm,
felt conscious, I felt present, I felt guided, whereas that was
mm,
just like like you say, impulsive and mm,
Yeah, not grounded at all. There's no
nope,
groundedness in that. Yeah.
no.
Yeah. It's interesting the difference, isn't it? It's interesting the difference. And I
Yes.
think sometimes when people are asking for all of those signs, I mean, it's different for everybody, but quite often it might be an impulse they're listening to rather than intuition. Or if it is intuition and they're getting those repetitive messages, they're not trusting it because they're thinking they need
Mm,
another sign, they need something else. But that constant like nudging that you're getting to go in a certain direction, that's your intuition talking to you.
yeah.
To give you a big example, one that was quite well, literally life changing for me, was back in a job, several sort of jobs I had to go where I hated the job, like I really hated it, but I
Yeah.
loved my state chair. So I looked after like I was in a state manager role and I loved the chair of the state committee. He was just the most amazingly brilliant man. And every couple of weeks, I'd have my catch up with him, we'd meet in the city, and it would always be an early morning meeting, and we'd talk for ages. It was great. We'd talk about what's going on, what we were working on, what we wanted to work on. It was always a great meeting. But
Mm,
after the meeting, because I'd get my dopamine fixes from him because he was just brilliant, I'd
yeah.
have to walk back to the office, and it was like this drudge of a walk back to the office. I hated walking back
Mm,
because I knew the energy that I'd be walking back into, and I really struggled in that space. So what I would
mm.
often do, actually, 9 times out of 10, what I would do is I would stop at, there used to be a Lindt cafe in Martin Place in Sydney. I would stop at the Lindt cafe, get a hot
Yum.
chocolate, because that would buy me some time on the way back to the office. But this particular morning, I had this nudge that no, you need to go straight back to the office today. And I'm fighting with it. I'm getting this guidance coming through and I'm fighting with it, but I don't want to go to the office. I hate the office. The energy's horrible. And I kept getting no, you need to go straight back today. You need to go straight back today.
Mm.
You need to go straight back today. And of course, that was when that horrendous, horrendous hostage situation happened at the Lindt
Oh
Cafe
my
in Sydney.
goodness.
And if I hadn't listened to that intuitive voice telling me go back to the office, I would have been in the Lindt Cafe when that happened.
Wow. And remember all
And
those examples from 9/11 like that? So many examples of people,
mm,
needing to stop and get a plaster for their blister or something that simple. I
that
read somewhere, I don't
simple.
I don't remember where it was, and I think it might have even been this morning,
Mm,
where it's like, and this happened to me yesterday before I went out into the city. When you go back inside because you've forgotten something, just
mm,
pause for a while
mm.
because universe, guides, whoever are probably just holding you there for a moment
Yeah,
to to keep you
for a
from something
reason.
like that. Yeah,
For a reason. And I share that
yeah,
example because I didn't want to follow that guidance. I didn't want to get
yeah.
straight back to the office, but I listened.
Wow.
And thank goodness I listened. So when that later in the afternoon, when everything's locked down in the city, we don't know what's going on. We didn't know what was happening when the city was locked down. We just knew that we had to get out of the city. It wasn't until we heard all the details later that I was, you know, it,
Wow.
yeah, I knew that I had yeah, oh God, I can't even talk about it because it's just, yeah, it
Mm,
really
mm.
impacted me so much. But, I listened to that guidance. And I guess that's the thing, right? It's not always convenient. It doesn't always feel right. If it's from a work perspective, if someone's getting that guidance that they should follow a certain direction, it's that niggling feeling like, oh, I want to do this, I want to do this, I want to do this. But the reason they don't jump in and follow that guidance is quite often that intuition is wanting them to do something bigger than they feel ready to step into.
Mm.
And so that fear can come into it. So
Yeah.
when I was getting pushed to follow that guidance to um, train to become a medium, I was getting those years. Find a circle, do a training program. You know you can do this. You can do it now, but you need the tools to work with it. Kept getting the guidance, getting the guidance, getting the guidance, getting the guidance. Eventually, when I, did listen, I just didn't do it the normal way, typical Scorpio. I went straight into trance mediumship, and it pushed me
Ah,
right out of my comfort
yeah.
zone. But it
Yeah.
was so phenomenal because from that first morning, you know, we were doing it and it was
Mm.
just phenomenal. But it
Yeah.
took me a while, which most people can relate to get beyond that fear of, can I do this? Can I do this? Can I do this? But that's the difference with intuition, right? Is it's not always easy. It puts us out of our comfort zone. We question whether we can do it, which is why some people will seek that, give me a sign, give me a sign. But it's this persistent feeling that when we do it, it actually turns out so much better than we anticipate. Like that first morning doing trance mediumship, I was taught by a UK medium, but not from the medium himself. We were taught by the spirit surgeon coming through the medium. He ran the class. It was like so
No,
trippy, so surreal. I'm like,
I
this is
love
like the
that
best
stuff.
thing
Would be
ever.
trippy.
So
Yeah.
trippy. But for Scorpio, it's like, I'm in heaven. And the
Yeah.
first exercise, he's like, I need someone to volunteer. And
Yeah.
my hand was up constantly. And I was shitting myself literally because he wanted to use me as an example to bring spirit through and connect in with my body and show people this is how you bring spirit into your body.
Absolutely.
Shitting myself. But you know what happened after I did it, right? I was practically in tears. It was the most
Yeah.
beautiful experience because what I didn't expect was for the love to come through from spirit, that feeling of love to come through. So all this fear we have attached to things, like it's so ridiculous sometimes because when we actually
Mm.
do it, the outcome is a million times more better than we expect. And so
Oh,
when I
yes.
listened to that guidance, I jumped in, put my hand up. I wanted to be the test dummy. It was life changing. It was absolutely
Mm.
life changing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Have,
Yeah,
have you got
it
another
would be.
example where have you got an example where you
Oh, look,
followed
I
that guidance related to work, like the sort of work you should be doing, and then the outcome you got when you followed that really strong guidance?
look several, and not related to the mainstream work I do, more related
Mm,
to the intuitive coaching, etc. work
mm,
that I do. If I think about the second book I wrote, I have to say that was born out of my breakup, from breakup to breakthrough, believe in you. And it was nothing to do with my business. I didn't, it's like, man, I'm putting all this time into this. This is not going to support my business, but I couldn't
mm,
stop. And even the way I found my coach, so I went to a writer's retreat in Italy. I asked her if she would coach me for my second book. And
mm.
it wasn't until we were on our first session about 6 weeks later that she told me that she was going through a divorce. I didn't
Right.
even know. And so things like
Yeah.
that happened the whole way through.
Yeah.
I would meet, I interviewed 8 women for that book. I would meet people and I'd go, oh my gosh, would you be interested in sharing that story? It
Mm,
just everything lined up. And what you was sharing about your medium training made me think about, I've done, I'm an EFT therapist, but also a theta healing
mm,
practitioner. Both of those times, I was completely guided and had people put in front of me to lead
mm.
me to do that training. And it was,
Yeah.
I just couldn't ignore it. It was just
Yes.
like, seriously, I'm seeing this again. And then I
Yeah.
remember. I can still see myself and the look on the other women's faces when we're standing and it was only our level one, and we went through several levels of theta healing training where we were to stand behind each other, do our process call in spirit, and then basically give a reading to the person in front of us. Now, I'm used to EFT that is kind of more practical, you're actually
Yes.
either healing something or they've got pain,
Mm,
you can see it. And so we're all thinking, oh my goodness, I don't know how to do this. But we
mm,
all did it. And then without a word of a lie, every single one of the people that had a reading, including myself when we switched, was like, wow, wow,
Yes.
that is so accurate. And so, really you talk about trust, and it's taken me years and years to trust it. I remember doing some clairvoyant training with a dear friend of mine who's an
Yeah.
aura photographer. Dean
Yeah.
Leakey, I have no idea where he is these days. I've tried to look him up, but I remember him saying to me, when you're coaching, do you ever have a moment where you're like, oh, I don't know where that came from? And I'm like,
Mm,
all the time. And he said,
mm.
that is clairvoyancy. Just
Yeah.
open your mouth and speak. You are being
Exactly.
guided. And that
Yes.
really stuck with me. That stuck with
Mm,
me.
mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Love it.
Yeah, wow. Gosh, you're
Love
taking
it.
me on a trip down memory lane.
Because it is such a stark difference between following that impulse and following that, intuitive
Hmm.
guidance. Like they're so, so different. And just to clarify, like when that intuition comes through, it can be that, that strong knowing, that sense of knowing, but we can also get intuitive dreams as well. We could have intuitive visions. For everyone, they do appear differently. Like for my daughter, for example, she gets them through dreams. And
Mm.
whenever she gets these psychic dreams and she follows that guidance, she's spot on, but she also knows that it's spot on. And so for other people, it's the same, whether it's a
Yeah.
vision you have and you trust that and you know that what you see or what you feel is right, but then we have to then follow that. It's when we don't follow it that we're like, damn, I knew I had that
Yeah.
inside. I didn't listen. Have you got an example where you had this strong, like, sense of something you had to do and you didn't follow it?
Oh my goodness. There will be lots. There will be lots. I've got nothing coming to me, but I know that there are numerous occasions where I've gone, should have listened,
Got to
should have
listen.
listened. But
Yes.
a few of
Do you know
this
when
has
I
only happened
often do that? It's the horse
when,
races. It's the horse races.
really?
When I've missed out on the trifecta and I like a first four, and I'll have this flash, but then like I do all
Oh,
my research and I do all my work, and then I'll get three out of the four, and then I'm like, I knew that one. I knew that one, and I've put it to the side. And I'm like, damn it, I should have listened. The thing is, right, that knowing people want bells to ring and all these loud, like aha moments, and it doesn't happen in a loud way. This intuition,
no.
when it comes through, it's not as loud as what we want it to be. So I wish, with the horse
Yeah.
races, even the lotto numbers, right? How often do we buy lotto tickets? It's not intuition, it's impulse. We see the
Impulse.
signs in the newsagents, we see the things come up on social media, and we're like, oh, it's a sign, it's a sign, it's a sign. It's not a sign, it's FOMO, right? And we jump
Yeah.
in and it's impulse.
Absolutely. And, for me, even though I do hear things, especially when I'm coaching, it's a knowing. It is just such a strong knowing.
Yes.
And on occasion, I've had a day when I absolutely know I'm present because I can see what's going to happen or know
Mm,
what's going to happen in my day before it happens as the day goes on. And then the most
mm,
incredible days. And I
mm.
think I'm not sure if this is where we're going, but it just brought up a thought for me around um uh oh, it's gone. Come back. Come back. Um no, it's gone. It'll come to me as soon as you start talking, but
It'll come to
as you
you.
were. As you were.
Yeah. So I guess the difference, right, between intuition and impulse is intuition isn't urgent. There's not that sense of FOMO. It's not always easy, but if we're chasing ease, we want ease, it's normally impulse because we're wanting that dopamine fix. But if we're chasing growth and that intuition is coming through and it's pushing us to grow, quite often that's intuition because it's pushing us out of our comfort zone and it's pushing us to do something bigger than maybe we feel ready for or we're not comfortable with. Like the Lint Cafe, I didn't want to go back to the office
Oh,
because
that's a
the
big
office
one.
was horrendous. but I listened. So
Mm,
intuition is not
mm.
always easy. It's not always convenient. It can be quite uncomfortable, but it feels right. And then when we follow that, we get the answer from that, knowing, yes, I followed this. This was the right thing to do. Whereas impulse, we get that short-term dopamine fix because we
Yeah.
feel like we're taking action and doing the right thing. Impulse wants it now. And how do we know if this is
No, so
intuition?
I was just thinking, like, we might not even know sometimes.
Well, this is where we can ask ourselves a series of questions. So if we're trying to discern between is this intuition or is this impulse, we can ask
Yeah.
ourselves, am I running from something? Am I running from something that's, making me feel uncomfortable? Or do I feel like I'm running towards something that feels real? I might not feel comfortable with it, but is it pushing me out of my comfort zone? Is it pushing some
Wow.
sort of growth? Then chances are it's likely to be your intuition. But then you also have to ask yourself, am I looking for proof? Am I looking for signs? Am I looking for reassurance? Because if you're desperately needing that sense of reassurance, this could be impulse trying to hijack the situation.
Man, this stuff's so real. I'm thinking of my examples going, oh, absolutely. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to listen back to this, you know. I'm going to have to listen back to this and write these down. Wow.
Yeah. So, that can be a challenge for us over the next few weeks is looking at
Yes.
where am I coming from? Where is my perspective? How real is this? Is it urgent, non-urgent? All those things that we spoke about, particularly when we know our triggers. So if we know we're getting certain dopamine fixes, right, that we switch off our intuition and we don't listen, it's being clued up on that. So particularly knowing that you're out there manifesting love at the moment and, we know it's not far off, right? Knowing your triggers that
Maybe.
if you're getting a dopamine fix, is it the authentic dopamine fix because he's met the criteria that I've put out there, or is it a superficial dopamine
And I
fix?
think I think I'm kind of lucky with that one in that I've been through it so many times that I will be wary, I will check in, I will ask those questions, which I'll have to get a reminder about what they are. But I really, really like that. I like having something I can
Mm,
tangibly ask myself.
mm.
Um, because
But look, the reason I say
yeah,
that is quite often we hear ourselves saying, "Oh yeah, no, I know now, I know now, I know now," but those dopamine fixes are so strong
they
that
hijack, right? They
it
override.
completely
Yeah,
overrides and hijacks. So unless we put something in place to question ourselves, we're going to let
yeah.
it override us and hijack us again. So it's
Okay,
something interesting
I
for us
will
to
take
think
on
about.
I will take on that beautiful challenge
Mm.
and observe this week. That's going to be really interesting.
Yeah, and I'm going to be interested to hear how you go because when I'm ready to manifest love, we can come back to this and have this conversation because I know how strong my triggers are and how easy it is to override that
Yeah,
sensible voice
yeah.
that needs to come through some.
I
So
must say I did join a new gym and there's, you know, there's the odd person that catches my attention.
good girl.
Mm. And then I'm like, nah,
I love it.
nah.
Love it. Love it. All right. On that note, Brenda,
Mm,
impulse versus intuition. Some great new insights and things for us to think about and to question ourselves sometimes because we all act on impulse from time to time,
yeah.
thinking it's spiritual guidance, it's, whatever, but quite often it's not.
That's what we want. Okay, watch this space, people. We shall report back.
Absolutely. Thanks, Brenda.
Oh, thank you. Bye. Mwah.
Bye.